Unit 6, Learning Target number 2. Understand that a data set has center, spread, and shape. Okay, so here we have a data set right over here. And this is just a set of data that shows the number of years people have been working at a cereal factory. So here are your results. That's a data set, a set of data that's shown for us so we can look at it. So what can we learn from this? Well, if we look at this data, we can see a couple of things. Number one, we can see that the data kind of goes up in a hill and kind of peaks here in the middle and it comes back down. All right, so we have along the bottom, we have the number of years that people have worked. Right here along the bottom, the number of years that people have worked, 1 through 20. And along the side, we have the frequency, which is a word that we use in statistics. It just means the number of people or the number of things or just the number, the measure. In this case, if we look over here, we look at the number of people who have worked 1 year. That's right at 15. So we have 15 people who have worked 1 year. And over on the other side, we have 11 people who have worked 20 years. And then here in the middle, we have 200 people who have worked right at 11 years. So what can we learn about this? Well, there are a couple of general observations we might make. Number one, we can see that there aren't a whole lot of new people coming in, so they don't hire a lot of people new every year. It looks like because they have so many other people here in the middle. And they don't have a lot of people who've been working 20 years or more, or even for that matter 19 years or more. And what that means is probably maybe they retire at the end of 18, 19 years. So we can make some observations about data based on a data set. And when we look at data, we use some mathematical statistical words, right? One of them is center. We use the word center to refer to where most of the data is. So where most of the data is. And we use that word a lot. The center of the data is where most of our scores or our people or our information is. Another word that we use is called spread. We use the word spread here to talk about the distance the data spreads across. So our spread here is from 1 to 20. The spread of the data is from 1 to 20. And some words that we use for that sometimes are range and interquartile range, or we use the letters IQR. Words that we use for center, by the way, are things like mean and median and mode. Those are the big ones that we use the most often, and they tell us where the center is. So once again, the center of the data is kind of like here where most of our data is. Now the center of the data is actually 11, right? But that's where most of our data is. And then finally we talk about the peak of the data. The peak of our data, you can probably guess, is right here at 200. That's the peak. Sometimes data will have more than one peak. Sometimes it might have something that comes up over here or over here. So let's take a look at here at an actual data set that we have. The data shows the number of students on a travel soccer team by age. So let's see what we can find out. Where is the center? Where is the center of the data? Well, most of my data is centered right here around 11. Right there around 11 is where the center of my data is. Now the spread of the data, again, sometimes we refer to that as range. The spread of the data is from 8 here to 14. So our spread of our data is from 8 to 14. And when we calculate the range, we'll know what that is. So it's the spread. The spread of the data goes from 8 to 14. Where's the peak? The peak of the data, well, we can see the peak of the data is right here. That's where our peak is. And if you'll notice, the data it can have multiple peaks, like we said, but it's spread out in these kind of like, think of little mountains here. There's a mountain, there's a mountain. And we look for the one that has the highest point, right? That's our peak. Are there any gaps in the data? Well, yes, we do have some gaps. If you look right here in the middle, here's a gap between 8 and 10, and here's a gap between 12 and 14. And what does the shape tell us about this data? Well, what can we conclude about the number of students on a travel soccer team by age? Well, we can say that we have the most students here at 10, right? The age 10 is where we have the most of our soccer students. And then we know that the most of the students as a whole, as an entire body, are between 10 and 12. So that's where the most of our kids are. We don't have very many kids who are 8 years old or very many who are in 14. So we would guess this might be a U10 kind of a soccer group, if you know what that means. And this is just a simple example of the kind of data that we can get. You'll find out even more as we continue through the unit.